Dear Harris supporters, it's time for a serious conversation. As a supporter of Vice President Kamala Harris, you likely believe in justice, health, and fairness. However, when it comes to the safety of our children and the health of the American public, you may not be fully aware of the role the current administration has played in ignoring critical scientific evidence. This letter is not about partisanship. It's about facts, public health, and our collective responsibility to protect future generations. The growing cancer trend. Time to stop ignoring the evidence. Recent reports from around the world are showing alarming trends. Brain tumors and central nervous system cancers are on the rise. The Danish Cancer Registry revealed a sharp increase in brain tumors over the past 2 decades, with a 107% rise among women and a 90% rise among men. This disturbing trend cannot be ignored, and it is time to face the uncomfortable truth that wireless radiation, particularly from cell phones, plays a role in this epidemic. Science is clear. Non-thermal RF radiation risks exist. Just as humanity once had to confront the scientific realities that the Earth is not the center of the universe or that it's not flat, we must now acknowledge the overwhelming evidence proving that radiofrequency radiation has biological effects far beyond just heating tissue. For over a quarter of a century, peer-reviewed research has consistently shown that non-thermal RF radiation can cause serious biological harm. The research has been replicated in vitro, in animal studies, and in human studies, all pointing to the same conclusion: non-thermal biological effects are real. The courts agree. The FCC has failed the public. In 2021, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and the Environmental Health Trust successfully sued the Federal Communications Commission. The U.S. Court of Appeals ruled that the FCC failed to adequately explain why it ignored 25 years of scientific research on non-thermal health risks. Despite this landmark ruling, the Biden-Harris administration has done nothing to force the FCC to comply with the court's orders. Instead of prioritizing public health, the administration has allowed the wireless industry to maintain control over outdated safety guidelines that ignore the dangers of non-thermal RF radiation exposure. These guidelines, which focus only on thermal effects, are woefully inadequate to protect us from the biological harm caused by constant exposure to wireless devices. The NTP cancer research. Shut down after finding clear evidence of cancer. One of the most critical moments in this debate came when the National Toxicology Program, or NTP, completed its groundbreaking study on wireless radiation. The NTP found clear evidence that RF radiation causes cancer in rats, specifically malignant gliomas and heart tumors. This research should have triggered immediate action to update safety guidelines and protect public health. Instead, the Biden-Harris administration defunded the NTP's cancer research on wireless radiation after these findings were made public. Imagine the outrage if, after finding clear evidence of harm from cigarette smoke, the government had decided to stop funding cancer research. That's exactly what happened here. And it's a tragedy that will affect countless lives if we don't demand change. A call to Harris supporters. Demand science-based leadership. As a Harris supporter, you have the power to demand better. You can call for a restoration of the NTP's research and insist that the FCC be held accountable for ignoring the court's ruling. We can no longer allow corporate interests to dictate public health policy. It's time to demand that our leaders prioritize the safety of the American people over industry profits. Let's stop pretending that non-thermal RF radiation risks don't exist. Just as repeatable scientific conclusions pave the way for a better understanding of our universe, it's time to do the same for the most critical part of our environment, the natural electromagnetic spectrum. This is the spectrum from which all life evolved, and it's being polluted by man-made radiation at levels that were never intended by nature. If we don't hold Kamala Harris and her administration accountable, the harmful neglect of public health will continue, all for the sake of corporate profits and maintaining power. The future of public health is in our hands. We cannot afford to be indifferent. Every man, woman, and child on Earth is exposed to wireless radiation every day, and the science is clear. It's harming us. It's time for evidence-based safety guidelines that protect us all, especially the most vulnerable among us, our children. For the sake of future generations, we must restore the natural electromagnetic environment that life depends on. It starts with recognizing the truth and holding our leaders accountable. Sincerely, John Coates, Founder, RF Safe, 727-610-88. This is no longer a question of whether RFR poses health risks. It's a proven fact. The research is clear, yet the Biden-Harris administration, alongside regulatory agencies like the Federal Communications Commission, or FCC, has failed to protect the American people. Instead of updating safety guidelines based on modern science, they continue to rely on outdated standards that only consider thermal effects, ignoring the overwhelming evidence of non-thermal bioeffects. The evidence non-thermal bioeffects of RF radiation. In a report published in September 2024 by the Danish Cancer Registry, an alarming increase in brain and central nervous system tumors was observed between 2004 and 2023. Incidence rates skyrocketed, with women experiencing a 107% increase in brain tumors and men seeing a 90% increase over this two-decade span. These statistics reveal a frightening trend, one that correlates closely with the proliferation of mobile phone usage during the same period. The wireless industry has long dismissed such concerns, claiming that increased tumor diagnoses are the result of improved detection technologies. However, these arguments fall flat when considering the sheer scale of the rise in cases. The more plausible explanation is environmental, namely the exponential increase in exposure to RF radiation from mobile phones, Wi-Fi routers, and other wireless devices. A recent meta-analysis titled Relationship Between Radiofrequency Electromagnetic Radiation from Cellular Phones and Brain Tumors. A meta-analysis brings even more compelling evidence to the table. This meta-analysis scrutinized various studies that measured RF EMF exposure and its association with brain tumors, revealing statistically significant results. In fact, the odds ratios for brain tumors increased as the exposure levels became more concrete, indicating that higher exposure to RF EMF significantly elevates the risk of brain cancer. The meta-analysis synthesized data from multiple studies, including case control and cohort studies, and found consistent results across the board. Those with higher mobile phone usage had an elevated risk of developing brain tumors. Notably, it found a 59% increased risk of brain tumors in people with high cumulative mobile phone use, directly contradicting claims from industry-funded studies that downplay these risks. The need for updated guidelines, FCC's failure to act. The FCC's safety guidelines, which are based on thermal effects, are woefully inadequate in today's world. Established decades ago, these guidelines were designed to protect against the heating effects of RF radiation. However, mounting research over the past 30 years has shown that non-thermal effects, such as DNA damage, oxidative stress, and hormonal disruption, are just as dangerous, if not more so, than thermal effects. Despite a U.S. Court of Appeals ruling in 2021, which found that the FCC had failed to adequately consider non-thermal bioeffects, the agency has yet to update its guidelines. This inaction is putting millions of Americans at risk, particularly children and pregnant women, who are more vulnerable to the effects of RF radiation. Biden-Harris administration, a failure to protect public health. The Biden-Harris administration has had ample opportunity to address the growing concerns over RF radiation, yet it has failed to act. One of the most egregious decisions was halting the National Toxicology Program's research into RF EMF's cancer risks. The NTP study, one of the largest and most comprehensive of its kind, found clear evidence that RF radiation can cause cancer, including malignant gliomas and heart schwannomas in rats. Despite these groundbreaking findings, funding for the NTP's research was cut, leaving crucial questions unanswered. This failure to protect public health is not just negligence, it's a dangerous alignment with corporate interests at the expense of American lives. The wireless industry continues to lobby against stricter regulations, pouring money into campaigns to undermine independent research and downplay the health risks associated with RF radiation. The push for reclassifying RF radiation, it's time to act. Currently, the International Agency for Research on Cancer classifies RF radiation as a Group 2B possible carcinogen, a designation that significantly underestimates the risks. This classification is based on outdated research that focuses solely on thermal effects. The growing body of evidence, including the NTP and Ramazzini Institute studies, clearly shows that RF radiation is a much more significant health risk, with non-thermal effects leading to cancer, neurological disorders, and hormonal imbalances. It's time to push for reclassification. RF radiation should be classified as a Group 1 carcinogen, alongside other known cancer-causing agents like tobacco and asbestos. Such a reclassification would force regulatory bodies to take action, implementing stricter safety guidelines and holding the wireless industry accountable for its role in this public health crisis. Restarting NTP research, a critical step forward. The NTP's research was a critical component in understanding the full scope of RF radiation's health effects. Its findings provided clear evidence that RF radiation can cause cancer, and further research could reveal even more about the non-thermal biological impacts of wireless technology. Restarting this research is not just important, it's essential. Without continued research, we are flying blind, allowing wireless devices to proliferate while ignoring the mounting evidence of their dangers. The NTP's work must be refunded, expanded, and prioritized so that we can fully understand the risks we face and take appropriate action to protect public health. What needs to be done? A call for action. First, update FCC safety guidelines. The FCC must update its specific absorption rate guidelines to reflect the non-thermal effects of RF radiation. The outdated focus on thermal effects ignores the vast body of research showing that even low levels of RF radiation can cause serious biological harm. Second, reclassify RF radiation as a Group 1 carcinogen. It's time for the IARC to reclassify RF radiation as a Group 1 carcinogen. The evidence is clear. RF radiation causes cancer, and it should be treated with the same seriousness as other carcinogens like tobacco and asbestos. Third, restart and expand NTP research. The NTP's work is critical in understanding RF radiation's full impact on human health. Funding must be restored and expanded to cover more comprehensive studies on the long-term health effects of RF radiation, including its impact on children, pregnant women, and the general population. Fourth, raise public awareness. Public awareness campaigns are needed to educate people about the risks of RF radiation and the steps they can take to protect themselves. The wireless industry has done an excellent job of downplaying these risks, but it's time for public health organizations, researchers, and advocacy groups to fight back with the truth. And finally, hold the wireless industry accountable. The wireless industry has spent years lobbying against stricter regulations and downplaying the risks of RF radiation. It's time to hold these corporations accountable for their role in this public health crisis. Elected officials must prioritize public health over corporate profits and take action to protect American lives. Protecting our future. The mounting evidence of the health risks posed by RF radiation is undeniable. From brain tumors to hormonal imbalances, the dangers of non-thermal bioeffects are clear. Yet the Biden-Harris administration, the FCC, and regulatory bodies continue to turn a blind eye to these risks, putting the American public in harm's way. It's time for change. We must demand accountability, update safety guidelines, and restart critical research to protect future generations from the dangers of wireless radiation. Public health should always come first, and we can no longer afford to ignore the invisible threat posed by RF radiation.